Welcome to this explainer. I mean, wow, what we just witnessed at the Azteca Stadium wasn't just your standard football win, it was an absolute masterclass in psychological survival. Today, we're going to unpack exactly how England managed to survive going down a man in the punishing, incredibly thin air of Mexico City. We're diving deep into how Harry Kane basically transformed this squad into an unbreakable juggernaut, anchoring them when the pressure was at its absolute highest. And on the flip side, we'll analyze the fatal tactical flaws that led to Mexico's truly stunning collapse. So let's dive right in. You know, when a football legend like Jurgen Klinsmann literally comes out and says, the sky is the limit for this English team, you have to pay attention. The stakes here were just enormous. Think about it. The high altitude, a roaring, hostile Mexican crowd, the sheer physical exhaustion setting in. Literally everything was stacked against them. To come out of that kind of environment with a victory, that sends a deafening message to every other team in the tournament. So here is our roadmap for today. We're going to cover the Azteca Thriller, England's juggernaut duo, surviving the red card, why Mexico ultimately failed, and finally we'll ask, is this a new English DNA?
Section 1, the Azteca World Cup Thriller. We really have to set the scene here because talk about chronological whiplash. This match was absolutely staggering. Playing at altitude completely alters a game. Your lungs are burning after just 10 minutes. Anyway, England actually stunned the stadium by racing out to a super quick 2-0 lead, making it look, frankly, almost easy. But Mexico claws one back right before the half, and that completely shifts the momentum in the building. Then, in the second half, disaster strikes. A red card for Jarell Quansah. Suddenly, England is down to 10 men. Yet, completely against the run of play, Harry Kane converts a crucial penalty. Mexico responds late with a Raul Jimenez penalty to make it 3-2, leading to an agonizing 11 minutes of stoppage time where England literally just had to park the bus. It was a relentless roller coaster from start to finish.
Section 2. England's juggernaut duo. To survive a wild timeline like that, you need superstars who can step up and carry the entire weight of a nation on their shoulders. And we saw two totally different yet equally vital leadership styles that make this team an absolute juggernaut. On one side, you have Harry Kane. Now, he might not have dominated possession in the first half, but his ice-cold conviction when the pressure is highest, it's just unmatched. His sheer presence commands the pitch. Plus, he showed supreme tactical unselfishness, dropping deep, absorbing fouls just to relieve pressure, and willingly making way for a defensive substitute late in the game. That sets a tone of complete sacrifice for the whole squad. And then, on the other side, you have Jude Bellingham, who provided an offensive masterpiece in the first half, followed by just exhausting, jaw-dropping defensive grit in the second. Troy Deeney hit the nail on the head when describing what makes Kane so terrifying. He noted that when Kane takes a penalty, he takes it with absolute conviction. Let's really pause and think about the pressure of this moment. You're in a deafening, incredibly hostile stadium, you're down to 10 men, and you know that if you miss, the momentum swing is probably going to end your entire tournament. And what does Kane do? He calmly steps up to the spot. The Mexican keeper even guessed the right way, but it simply didn't matter. The ball was struck with such absolute, undeniable certainty. That single moment, right there, that is exactly how Kane makes this team a true juggernaut. He absorbs the sheer panic of the environment, neutralizes it with total reliability, and completely stabilizes his teammates when they need him the most. But hey, Bellingham's first goal was just as vital. It was a literal masterclass in transitional football. It plays out like a textbook step-by-step. It starts fluidly with Jordan Pickford's precision passing right to Declan Rice, who then makes this grueling 60-yard sprint down the right flank. Rice finds Bukayo Saka for the cross, and boom, there is Bellingham, arriving with absolute perfect timing into the box to finish it. Jurgen Klinsmann called it a masterpiece for teaching young kids how to make a run. It was just clinical precision, slicing right through all that chaos.
Bellingham wasn't just an offensive weapon, though. I mean, the guy was everywhere. He delivered a crucial goal line clearance in the first half to block what was a guaranteed Mexican goal. He ran endlessly in that thin, punishing air. Late in the game, he's out there actively directing substitute Morgan Rogers on exactly where to position himself. He played with a fierce tactical discipline up front, tracking back tirelessly. Honestly, he played like a man possessed, completely determined to drag England over the finish line.
Section 3. Surviving the red card. Because let's be real, everything changed when Quansah was sent off for that high tackle. This was the exact moment that forced England into absolute, desperate survival mode. 35. Just let that number sink in for a second. That is the agonizing number of minutes England had to survive with only 10 men.
35 minutes of relentless Mexican pressure, wave after wave of attacks, all while practically gasping for air in the high altitude of the Aztec. The psychological response here was the real victory. They achieved some massive mental milestones during that stretch, maintaining deep togetherness, overcoming severe adversity, digging in defensively, and somehow physically handling the altitude. Usually, when a team is handed every single excuse on a silver platter to just collapse and lose a game, they take it. But England, they completely refused. In fact, the defensive effort was described by analysts as a masterpiece of work. Now, it wasn't pretty football, for sure, but it was incredibly heroic. The physical toll of operating in a defensive low block with your lungs burning from the altitude is just immense. Yet we saw guys like Anthony Gordon tracking back relentlessly. We saw Declan Rice looking absolutely exhausted just 30 minutes in, but flat out refusing to stop running. Every single player out there was throwing their body on the line, sliding in front of shots, and making these desperate clearances. Goalkeeper Jordan Pickford made some fabulous saves to keep them alive. It was just this gritty, unified wall of white shirts. Section 4. Why Mexico ultimately failed. So we have to ask the big question. How exactly does a team with a man advantage, total domination of possession, and 80,000 screaming fans fail to equalize? Well, let's analyze the critical tactical breakdown here. Mexico's failure essentially boils down to one-dimensional attacking. When faced with a 10-man low block, what you really need is extreme patience. They needed the intricate five-star passing they actually showcased in the first half to stretch the defense and create real gaps. Instead, they completely abandoned their game plan. They resorted to this predictable, panicked volume of desperate crosses into the penalty area. It's like they stopped thinking and just started reacting. And because of that, it turned into this massive, glaring tactical mismatch. Mexico just kept looping these high, hopeful balls into the box, totally ignoring the fact that England's manager, Thomas Tuchel, had literally just brought on massive center backs to deal with exactly that scenario. You have 6'5" Dan Burn and 6'3" John Stones treating these crosses like it's a casual heading practice on a Tuesday. There were no little slip passes, no one pulling the strings in the middle. By completely abandoning the ground game and their creative identity, Mexico played right into England's hands. Mexican analyst Janelle Farias put it perfectly. Panic replaced patience. She noted that they just didn't know how to manage their emotions, and it became totally desperate. In knockout football, when you lose your emotional regulation, your final third quality goes straight out the window. They had 35 minutes to find just one clinical pass to tie the game, but the anxiety of that roaring crowd seemed to infect the players on the pitch, entirely destroying their composure. And all of that sheer panic culminated in a catastrophic, entirely avoidable error. I mean, how did England get their third goal? A simple long ball is flicked on by Harry Kane, which forces a foot race. The Mexican goalkeeper comes rushing out and makes this rash, totally unnecessary challenge, giving away a penalty from his own goal kick. It was absurdly simple. You simply cannot hand free gifts to a Juggernaut team at the World Cup. As we established earlier, Harry Kane is going to punish you from the penalty spot every single time. Section 5. A new English DNA. Let's take a step back and look at the big picture for this squad as they march into the quarterfinals. The football world is pretty heavily divided right now. The optimists, they look at this game and see a team with the unmatched grit, incredible unity, and raw survival instincts that you actually need to win tournaments. They point out that this England squad is vastly more united now than in years past. The skeptics, however, warn that England cannot keep relying entirely on individual magic from Kane and Bellingham. They point out a glaring, persistent issue. England still hasn't figured out how to truly control a game with the ball at their feet. But, we absolutely cannot ignore Thomas Tuchel in all this. He successfully steered the ship through a hell of a storm. He used public mind games leading up to the tournament to light a fire under Jude Bellingham, and honestly, it worked flawlessly. He perfectly nailed his defensive substitutions, throwing on those big men like Burn and Stones right when the red card happened. He accepted that they couldn't just run and gun in the thin altitude, so he set them up to brilliantly absorb pressure and strike on the counter. It was a tactical master plan born out of pure necessity. So that brings us to the ultimate question, doesn't it? Is this gritty, defensive resilience the new DNA needed to finally win the World Cup? It might not be the pretty, free-flowing football that fans dream of, but hey, if you can survive 35 minutes down a man in the Azteca, maybe, just maybe, you have the exact kind of ugly, unbeatable resolve required to lift the biggest trophy in sports. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer. I'll see you next time.